Hello everyone, welcome to today's lecture of Object-Oriented Programming using Java with the paper code CS504A. This is Shayani Chandra, Assistant Professor of Department of Computer Science and Engineering of Guru Nanak Institute of Technology. Let's look at today's lecture contents. Today we will learn about method and constructor overloading. Then we will learn about constructor chaining and how this keyword can be used to implement constructor chaining. Let's start with method overloading. Method overloading is one of the Java's most exciting and useful features. In Java, it is possible to define two or more methods within the same class that share the same name, as long as their parameter declarations are different. When this is the case, the methods are said to be overloaded and the process is referred to as method overloading. Method overloading is one of the ways that Java supports polymorphism. When an overloaded method is invoked, Java uses the type, that is the return type, and or the number of arguments inside a method as its guide to determine which version of the overloaded method to actually call. Thus, the overloaded methods must differ in the return type and or the number of their parameters. While overloaded methods may have different return types, the return type alone is insufficient to distinguish two versions of a method. When Java encounters a call to an overloaded method, it simply executes the version of the method whose parameters match the arguments used in the call. Let us take a simple example to better understand this concept. Here in this program, I have written a syntax only. I have not written the full code. Obviously, the main method is there. Here you can see that a single method is taken, which is show. Show is the name of the method. But here, this show method is being used 3 times in this program within the same class A. The class name I have given is A, and this show method has been used 3 times in 3 different situations inside this class A. Here in the first case, the show method has no parameters inside it and its return type is void. That means this method is not going to return anything. In the second case, this show method is used again. The name is same here also. It is show. And here there is only one parameter which is of integer type and the return type of the method is also int. That means this show method will return an integer value. In the next case, that is the last case, the show method is used again. And here only one parameter is there, that is D, which is of double type. And the return type of the method is double also. That means this show method will return a double value. So here we can see that we have used the same method thrice in this program in order to give you different outputs. That means all these 3 methods are not going to give you same outputs. They will give you different outputs as per the requirements and as per the inputs that are being provided into these 3 methods. But the name of the methods are same, which is show. This thing can be done in a Java program, and when this thing can be done, we say that this show method is overloaded, and this process of writing the same method multiple times with the same name by just differentiating the parameters and or the return types is known as method overloading. As I just told that there are 2 rules or 2 conditions for method overloading to occur. Let me write down the rules first. So these are the 2 rules that must be followed in order to method overriding to occur. Now, the first rule says that the return type must be different. Return type means the return type of the method must be different and or the parameters must be different. That means the parameters that are being passed into the methods should be different. The number of parameters as well as the data types of the parameters should be different. So here I have written and or, that means either any of these 2 conditions are met or both are met. But These two conditions should be satisfied theoretically. That means any of the two conditions or both the conditions should be satisfied theoretically. If we look at practically, then we will see that return type alone cannot differentiate between these three methods, because when the overloaded methods are called, they will be called depending upon the values that are being passed to their parameters. So when that is the case, we have to depend on the parameters only. That means if we depend on the return type only, then it may be possible that the two methods which should give you two different outputs are not working as two different methods. That means the compiler cannot differentiate between the two methods because only the return types are different, but the parameters are same. Say for example, if I don't write here int a, that means if I don't write here int a, that means there are no parameters. Here also there are no parameters. That means it is a normal method, a simple method which has no parameters. So it is not a parameterized method. Here also we have not written the parameter. I have cut down the parameter. That means this has also become a simple method. It is no more a parameterized method. So the return types are different. It is void here and it is int here. So the first condition is met, and the conditions for method overloading says that and or. That means either of the two conditions must be met in order to method overloading to occur. So here we can see that the first condition is met. That means the return type is different. Here it is void, here it is int. Then also the method overloading will not take place because the parameters are same. And when the show method will be called, then it will be called depending on the values that are being passed into the parameters. Here also there are no parameters, and here also there are no parameters. That means when we will call the show method, we will pass no parameters. So compiler will get confused which show method to call, whether this one or this one, because no parameters are being supplied to both these methods. That means depending on these return types, we cannot differentiate between the two overloaded methods. That means along with the return types, the parameters must also be different. Or if the parameters are different only and the return types are same, then also the compiler can differentiate between the overloaded methods. That means although theoretically these are the two conditions which says that the return type of the method must be different, and or the parameters of the methods must be different, but practically we can see that the return type alone cannot differentiate between the overloaded methods. Along with the return type, the parameters must also be different. Or if only the parameters are different, then also the compiler can differentiate between the overloaded methods. So let's see an example program to see how this method overloading can be implemented in a Java program. Here I have written a program that demonstrates how method overloading can be implemented in Java. This class overload demo has four methods which are overloaded. The name of the method is test. Here you can see that this is the first case where there are no parameters inside the test method and the return type is void. Inside this test method, we have just printed a text which will give you no parameters as the output. In the next method, there is a single parameter inside it, which is a, and it is an integer type variable, and its return type is void again. That means here you can see that the return types are same for both these two overloaded test methods, but the parameters are different. Here there are no parameters, and here there is only one integer parameter. That means this test method will overload this test method, and here it is for one integer parameter. Inside the test method, we have just printed the value of this parameter. Then in the third case, this is another test method which is the overloaded version of these two test methods, and here you can see that we have passed two parameters a and b, both are of integer types. So this is an overloaded test method for two integer parameters. Here the void is a return type. That means here also the return type remains same like these two overloaded methods. So in these three cases, we have seen that we have kept the return type same as void, and we have just differentiated the three overloaded methods using the parameters. Here there are no parameters, and here there is one parameter, and here there are two parameters. Inside this test method, we have printed the value of these two parameters. Next, the test method is overloaded again, but now here you can see that the return type has been changed. Here it was void and here it is double. That means this test method is going to return a double value to the main method or to the calling method. And inside this test method, there is a single parameter, but its data type is double. That means this test method is obviously an overloaded test method, but this time for a double parameter. Inside the method, we have printed the value of the double variable, and as it is a double as return type, so this method should return a value to its calling method. That's why this return statement is given, and this method is going to return a value a into a. Whatever value we will be passing into this a will be multiplied with a again, and that value will be returned to its calling method. Now after that, we have written the main class, which is the overload class, and then the main method is written inside it. And inside the main method, we have created an object ob object is of the previous class. The previous class name was overload demo, so we have created the ob object of this previous class overload demo. Then we have taken a variable result which is of double type, because this double method, this test method which has a return type double, is going to return a value a into a to its calling method, which is main in our case. That value should be held into a variable, and that double variable is result. Now we will call all the versions of the test method, all the versions of the overloaded test method, one by one. Now we can see that in the first call, we have called the test methods using the object of this class. Obviously, we have to call a member of another class from another class using the object of that class, as we all know. So we are calling this test method using the object OB. So this test method will be matched with all these four test methods. And the matching will be done depending on the parameters that are being passed. Here we have not passed any parameter. That means the matching will be done with the first test method. Here the match will be found, because here also inside it there are no parameters, and here also inside it we have not passed any value. So the matching will be done with all these four overloaded methods, but the match will be found only with this test method. That means this version of this test method will be executed first, and whenever this test method will be called, this no parameters will be given as output. After that, another overloaded test method is called with only one integer parameter, only one integer value inside it. So only one integer value has been passed into it. So again, the compiler will do a match. The compiler will match this test method with all these four methods, and the match will be found here, because the parameters, the parameter that is being that has been passed is an integer parameter, and here also you can see that this is an integer parameter. So the match will be found here, and this test method will be executed. And whenever this test method will be executed, or whenever this test method will be called, the value of the a variable, which is 10, will be printed on screen. So the next output on screen would be a colon. After that, a space will be shown, and after that the value of the parameter a, which is 10, will be shown on screen. Now after that, another overloaded test method is called with two integer parameters 10 and 20. So again, the compiler will do the matching, and the match will be found here, because here also there are two integer parameters a and b. So the first parameter 10 will be passed into this a, and the next parameter 20 will be passed into this b. And whenever this test method, this overloaded test method will be called, the control will be immediately transferred to this test method, that because of match has been found here, and this test method will be executed. So whenever it will be executed, this statement will be printed on screen. That means the values of the two variables or the two parameters will be displayed on screen. So the next output will be a and b colon. After that, a space will be displayed. After that, the value of a. After that, a space again. And after that, the value of b will be displayed on screen. In the last call, we can see that another overloaded test method is called, and here inside the value or inside the parenthesis, we have given a floating point value, which is a double value. Now this, in this case, the compiler will again do the matching, and the match will be found here, because here also inside this test method we can see that a double variable has been a double parameter has been given. So this 123.25 value will be passed into this double parameter a. So whenever this overloaded test method is called, the compiler will immediately call this test method, and whatever inside it will be executed. That means the value of the variable a will be printed on screen first. So the first output that this program and this method will give you is double a colon. After that, space will be displayed, and after that 123.25, which is the value of the variable a, will be displayed on screen. And after that, this return statement will be executed. That means 123.25 into 123.25 will be returned to the calling method, because here the call is being made from inside the main method. That means this a into a value will be returned to the main method, and it will be returned to where? It will be returned to here, and that value will then be stored into the variable result. So we have to print the value of this result variable in order to display it on screen. That's what we are doing in the next statement. So in the next statement, the output that will be shown on screen is result of ob.test 123.25 colon. After that, a space will be displayed on screen, and after that, the value of the multiplication will be displayed on screen. So let's execute the program to see the output. Before executing, let me tell you that the main class name is overload. So I have saved the program using the name of the main class, which is overload, and then I have given the extension .java. I have saved the file in desktop. Just as I told, the outputs that are being displayed are no parameters first. That means this is the output of the first test method, which has no parameters in it. The second output a colon space 10. This is the output of the second overloaded test method, which has only one integer parameters inside it. The third output is for the third overloaded test method, which has two integer parameters inside it. The fourth output is from the fourth or last overloaded test method, which has a double parameter inside it. And lastly, in the last statement, you can see that the result of the result variable, which holds the returned value of this double method, is being shown here. So this is how the method overloading concept is implemented in Java. Now you have already understood that how the conditions for method overloading to occur are being implemented in order to do a Java program, which demonstrates the use of method overloading. So let me tell you one thing again, that if you uh, defer only the return types, then the method overloading is not going to take place, because of the fact that, let me do this here. Suppose I'm deleting this int a variable and I am making it int. So here you can see that the two methods are test, and the return types are void and int. And here also there are no parameters, here also there are no parameters. But when the method will be called from here, from inside the main method, you have seen that the call is being done depending on the match that has been found, and the matching has been done depending on what values we are passing from here to these methods. So similarly, you can see that whenever we will call this test method, the compiler will go here and it will find that this is a test method which has no parameters. This is also a test method and this also has no parameters. Then the compiler will get confused which test method to call, because both the methods have no parameters inside it. Only their return types are different. That means if you make the return type different, then the method overloading is not going to happen. Along with the return type, you also have to make the parameters different. Then only the return type, no, then only the method overloading is going to take place, just like I have done here. If you want to do it int, then also you can do it. That also you can do it. If you make it int, then this test method should return an integer value to the main method. That's it. If you make it void, then this method is not going to return anything to the main method. That is the difference only. But here you can see that the call that is being made to the overloaded methods, that call has been made depending on the parameters or the values that are being passed to the parameters. That means whenever the values will be passed to the parameters, the compiler will find a match depending on the values that are being passed to the parameters. If no match is found, obviously some error will be displayed. If the match is found, then that method will be executed. That version of the overloaded method will be executed. Here you can see that there are test methods, four overloaded test methods, and in the first call, the first version of the test method is being executed. In the second call, the second version of the overloaded test method has been executed. In the third call, the third version of the overloaded method has been executed, and in the fourth call, the fourth version of the overloaded test method has been executed. That means the call will be made depending on the values that are being passed to the parameters, but not depending on the return types. So although method overloading theoretically says that the return type and or the parameters of the overloaded methods must be different, but practically it has been seen that it can be seen that just making the return types different will not implement the concept of method overloading in a Java program. You have to make the parameters different also along with the return types. So this is how polymorphism concept is implemented in Java using the concept of method overloading. As polymorphism says that one thing that can have many forms. Here you can see that one thing, which is the method, can have many forms. Here it has one form, here it has another form, here it has another form, and here it has another form. So here only one thing, that is the test method, has four forms, and in the four situations it is giving four different outputs. So this is how the polymorphism concept is implemented in Java using the concept of method overloading. Now one thing uh, to keep in mind, that whenever this call is being made which depends on the values that are being passed to the parameters, then the compiler will go for a matching, and the matching will be done depending on the values that are being passed to the parameters. Then that version of the method will be called where the match has been found. So whenever this a particular version of the overloaded method will be called, that call is being made during the compilation but not during the execution. That's why this method overloading, also sometimes known as static polymorphism. That means the concept of static polymorphism can be implemented using the concept of method overloading in Java, because the that version, which version of the overloaded method will be called, that decision is being taken in compilation time by the compiler. How the compiler takes the decision depending on the values that are being passed to the overloaded methods. The compiler takes the decision wherever the match has been found, that version of the overloaded method will be executed. And that decision is being taken by the compiler during the compilation. That's why this method overloading is also known as static polymorphism or early binding. Here I have written the three names: method overloading, static polymorphism, early binding. All the three things are used interchangeably in Java because all the three things denote the same thing: method overloading, static polymorphism, and early binding. Why the name early binding? Because the binding of the method is done at the compilation time, which is the early phase of executing a Java program, and the late phase is the execution time or runtime or interpretation time, which we will see in inheritance chapter, how late binding or dynamic polymorphism can be implemented using method overriding. Here is another program of method overloading to demonstrate how automatic type conversions apply to method overloading. Here you can see that overload demo is a class which has three overloaded methods inside it. The first one is a simple method which has no parameters and which has a void return type. It will print no parameters. The second version of the overloaded test method has a return type void and has two integer parameters a and b, and inside it the values of the two parameters have been printed. The third version of the overloaded test method has a return type void and has a double parameter, and inside it the value of the double parameter has been printed. As you can see that overload another is the main class. That's why I have saved the file using the main class name and after that a .java extension. This is the main method. Here inside the main method I have created the OB object of this overload demo class, and I have taken an integer variable I which has a value 88. Now I am calling the overloaded methods one by one. First, when this method is called, the match will be found here. So this test method will be executed. After that, when this test method will be called with two integer values, then match will be found here. So this test method will be executed then. After that, the test method with a single integer parameter has been called. This I is an integer variable. So passing this integer variable as parameter to this test method means that we are calling the test method with an integer value. I has a value 88. So actually we are passing the value 88 here. But here you can see that no overloaded test methods are there which has a single integer parameter in it. So in this case, the compiler should give you an error. But this is not the case. The compiler is not going to give you any error here. Here the automatic type conversion will take place. That means this integer will be automatically converted into double, because here the compiler will see that an overloaded test method is there with a single parameter and its data type is double. So the compiler will automatically convert this integer variable I into double variable. That means automatic type conversion will take place. As we know that for automatic type conversion to take place, the two rules that should be satisfied are the two types must be compatible. Here we can see that both are numeric types. This is double and this is integer. Both are numeric types. So the two types are compatible. The first condition is satisfied. And the second condition or the second rule says that the destination type should be larger than the source type. Here the destination type is double and the source type is integer. That means destination is greater than source. So both the conditions are met. That's why the automatic type conversion is being taken place. That's why here the compiler will not give you any error. Instead, I will be stored into A. That means the value of I, which is 88, will be stored into A. When this is the case, when this is the scenario, this kind of scenario will be there whenever, then the compiler, the Java C compiler will automatically do type conversion if no match is found and if it finds that there is a place for doing automatic type conversion. Obviously, if there were two double variables as parameters like this, if this was the case, then obviously no type conversion can take place, because there are two double variables and here we are passing only one variable, so it cannot be automatically converted. As because there is only one parameter which is of double type and the conditions for the automatic type conversion are being met, that's why the automatic type conversion is being done by the Java compiler. So the value 88 here will be stored into the double variable a, and its value will be shown on screen. And after that, when a double value will be passed into the overloaded test method, automatically this test method will invoke this test method, because the match will be found here. So the compiler will call this test method here in this case. That means this program is not going to give you any error. This program is going to run perfectly. So let's see the output to better understand the program. As I have just explained that these are the outputs. No error is being displayed, and this is the value of the integer that has been converted into a double, and then it is being shown. As it has been converted into a double, that's why this 0 is being shown after this decimal point. So till now, we have shown you how method overloading takes place in Java. What is the concept of method overloading? What are the conditions for method overloading to occur? And how automatic type conversion takes place in case of method overloading. The same concept of method overloading can also be applied to constructors. Then it is called constructor overloading. Let's see an example to better understand the concept of constructor overloading. This is a program that demonstrates the use of constructor overloading in Java. The same concept of method overloading is applied here also, but in case of method overloading, the concept of method overloading is being applied on methods, but here the concept of overloading is being applied on constructors. As you can see that this is class A, which has two instance variables of integer types A and B. This is the constructor or default constructor, or explicitly written the body of the default constructor here. That means it has no parameters inside it. It will just print this statement on screen. After that, again another constructor has been written with the same name. So here you can see that this is the same case as that of the methods. In case of methods also, we have written the one method multiple times using the same name inside a single class in order to implement the concept of overloading by making the return types and the and or the parameters different. Here also we will see that we will write down the same constructor with the same name, which is obviously the name of the class, multiple times inside the same class, but here we can only make the parameters different. As you all know that the constructors have no return types. This is also another reason why making the return types different cannot make it overloading, whether it is method overloading or constructor overloading, because the overloading concept can also be applied to constructors, and constructors have no return types. That's why the making the return types different cannot make it overloading, cannot implement the concept of overloading in Java. This is also another reason. Here you can see that this is the second constructor. The same constructor name here also I have given. Inside it, two parameters x and y, both are integers, have been taken, and the value of x has been assigned into a, the instance variable a. The value of y has been assigned into b, the instance variable b, and then I have just printed the two values. Then this is the third version of the overloaded constructor, which is the same constructor. The name of this constructor is same, which is the name of the class. And here I have taken only one parameter, which is an integer parameter, and I have assigned the value of the parameter m into both the instance variables a and b. So this is how we can assign one value to multiple variables. And then I have just printed the values of the two instance variables. This const overload is the main class because inside it the main method is written. Inside the main method I have created three objects because of the reason that we have to call the three constructors, and you all know that constructors are being called in the object creation statement itself. And just like the method calling statement, we cannot call the constructors. We cannot call a constructor using the object and the dot operator. We have to call the constructor here, which is the object creation statement itself. So in order to call three different constructors, we have to create three different objects. Otherwise, in a single statement, you cannot call three different constructors. That's why three different objects have been created. Using the first object OB1, the first constructor which has no parameters inside it has been called. So whenever this OB1 object is being created, this constructor body will be executed and no parameters will be the first output of this program. Whenever the next object OB2 has been created, this constructor with two integer parameters is being called. That means this constructor body will be executed. That means the 10 value will be passed into the parameter x and the 20 value will be passed into the parameter y. Then the value of x, which is 10, will be assigned into a, and the value of y, which is 20, will be assigned into b. Then the two values will be printed on screen. So the next output will be a and b colon, then a space will be displayed. Then after that 10, then a space again, and then 20 will be displayed on screen. In this statement, when the third object is being created, this constructor is being called. So the match will be found here in the third constructor, and this body of the constructor will be executed. So 7 will be passed into the parameter m, and then the value of the parameter m, which is 7, will be assigned into both the instance variables a and b. So whenever the next statement will be executed, the two values that will be printed for both the variables will be same, 7 and 7. So this is how constructor overloading is being implemented in Java. Here you can see that um, we have created three different objects in order to call three different versions of the overloaded constructors. And here also we can see that the matching is being done by the compiler during compilation, and depending on the values that are being passed to the parameters of the constructor. Here no parameters have been passed. That's why this version of the overloaded constructor A has been called. Here two integer parameters have been passed. So here the match has been found. That's why this overloaded constructor has been called. And here only one integer parameter has been passed. That means the match is found here. That's why this constructor has been called. So this is how constructor overloading can be implemented in Java. Now let's execute the program to see the output. This is what I have just discussed. The first output is for the default constructor, which has no parameters inside it. The second output is for the parameterized constructors, which has two integer parameters inside it. And the third output is for the third parameterized constructor, which has a single parameter inside it, and that value of the parameter has been assigned into both the instance variables a and b. That's why the same values are being shown here for both the variables, which is 7 and 7. So in today's class, till now we have learned about method overloading, how automatic type conversion takes place in method overloading. Then we have learned about constructor overloading, and here also we have shown that the same concept of overloading or static polymorphism or early binding can be applied to constructors also. Next, we will see how constructor chaining is implemented in Java. Before going into the detail of constructor chaining, let's explain what is constructor chaining. Suppose this is a sample program which implements the concept of constructor overloading. This is a simple default constructor and its body is being written here. This is another parameterized constructor which has only single parameter inside it. Now, if we call this default parameter from inside this parameterized constructor, here if we write down the calling statement of this constructor here inside the parameterized constructor body. And if we call this parameterized constructor from inside this parameterized constructor here, if we write down the calling statement here, then that means we are calling one constructor from inside the body of another constructor. And it goes on like this. This constructor is being then again called from inside this another constructor, which is also a parameterized constructor with two parameters, two integer parameters inside it. That means we are calling one constructor from inside the body of the another constructor. And this goes on like this. So this is known as constructor chaining. And this not only goes downwards, this can also go upwards. That means this can also go backwards, or it can be said like, it can be explained like, this parameterized constructor can also be called from this default constructor. Similarly, this constructor which has two parameters can also be called from inside this parameterized constructor which has only a single parameter. That means the call can be done in this way, or the call can also be done in this way. It can go bottomwards or it can go upwards. Then also in both the cases we call it constructor chaining. That means the chain kind of thing has been created. Whenever it is being called, one constructor is being called from another, and it goes on like this. So we can say that a chain kind of thing is being created. And here in this case, the chain is created bottomwards. And here in this case, the chain is created upwards. That's why this concept is known as constructor chaining. And in order to implement constructor chaining, we have to use this method. So let's see an example program of constructor chaining to see how it can be implemented in Java, and then discuss about this method which must be used in order to implement constructor chaining. This is a program which demonstrates the concept of constructor chaining in Java. This is a user-defined class A. Inside it, we have written a default constructor which will just print no parameters. Then after that, we have again written another parameterized constructor. That means here the constructor overloading is taking place because three versions of the same constructor have been written here inside the same class. So constructor overloading is taking place. This is default constructor. This is a parameterized constructor which has a single integer parameter inside it. Inside its body, we have written a method named this. This method here will call the default parameter, the default constructor that you have written here inside the body of this single parameterized constructor. So whenever this method will be executed here, then this statement will actually call the default parameter and default constructor that you have written just above it. So here you can see that this method will call this parameterized constructor, this default constructor from inside this single parameterized constructor. So whenever this statement will be executed, the compiler will go to call the default constructor here. That means no need to call this default constructor explicitly here. And after that, a system.out.println statement has been written, which will just print the value of this parameter x. Then again, another parameterized constructor has been written, and this time it takes two parameters, two integer parameters. Inside this parameterized constructor, we have called this single parameterized constructor. That's why we have written this method, and inside its parenthesis, we have given the value 7. That means this value 7 will be passed into this x, and whenever the statement will be executed, the compiler will directly go to execute this single parameterized constructor. That means this method here, along with this single integer value 7, will actually call this single parameterized constructor from inside this double parameterized constructor body. So this statement will actually call the single parameterized constructor, that means this one, from inside this double parameterized constructor body. So whenever the 7 value will be passed, this will be passed into this x variable. Then this constructor will be called or executed. Inside it, again we have written this method which will call this default constructor in turn. That means this statement will be executed first, then this statement will be executed, and then this statement will be executed, all with a single object creation statement. In the previous constructor overloading program, we have seen that in order to call all the three different versions of the overloaded constructors, we have to create that number of objects, because we know that the constructor calling thing is being done in the object creation statement itself. We don't need to call the constructors explicitly as we normally do using methods. So in that case, in that program, you have seen that as there were three overloaded constructors. So we have created three objects in order to call all the versions of the overloaded constructors. But here, as we have used this method in order to implement constructor chaining, we don't need to create three objects in order to call all these three constructors. We just need to create one object. We just have to write one object creation statement, and there we just have to call the last constructor, which is this one. Because whenever this part will be executed, 10 will be passed into x and 20 will be passed into y. Inside it, we have written this method which will call this single parameterized constructor. Inside it, we have written this method with no parameters which will call this default constructor. And this default constructor will give you the first output, which is no parameters. Then the compiler control will again come to this single parameterized constructor, which has a remaining statement to be executed, which is the printing the value of the variable x, which is 7. 7 has been passed into x, so the value of the x that will be given as the next output is 7. And then at last, this remaining statement of this double parameterized constructor will be executed, which is the value of x and y, which are 10 and 20 that have been passed into it. So this program will give you three outputs. The first one is for the default constructor, no parameters. Second one for this single parameterized constructor, which is 7. And the third one for this double parameterized constructor, which are 10 and 20. So this is how constructor chaining can be implemented. Here you have seen that we have called a default constructor from inside a parameterized constructor body. And here you can see that we have called one parameterized constructor from inside another parameterized constructor body. As I have just described, the first output is no parameters, second output is 7, third output is 10 space 20. Coming back to the program, let me tell you one more thing, that this call here, the call is being made to this default constructor. Always remember that you have to make this call inside the first statement of the constructor. That means whenever you are going to call this default constructor from this parameterized constructor, the call to this default constructor should be the first statement inside this constructor. That means this method should be written in the first statement of this parameterized constructor, which will call the default constructor in turn. Similarly, here also, whenever you are going to call this parameterized constructor from inside the body of this parameterized constructor, the call to this single parameterized constructor should be the first statement inside the constructor body. That means this method should be written in the first statement of this double parameterized constructor, which will call this single parameterized constructor in turn. Always you have to keep in mind this thing. If you don't write this method, or if you don't write the constructor calling statement from another constructor in the first statement, then this program is going to give you error. You always have to write down this constructor calling statement from another constructor in the first statement of the constructor body. Here in this program, you can see that this parameterized constructor has been called from inside this body of the default constructor. That means here the constructor chaining is being implied in backwards. In the previous program, you have seen that the constructor chaining has been implemented in downwards or bottomwards manner. That means one constructor is being called from another constructor body, and the call is being made from that constructor which has been placed beneath the above constructor. That means the call is being made, the chain has been formed in a downwards manner. Here the chain is being formed in an upwards or backwards manner. That means the first this constructor is going to be executed, then this constructor is going to be executed. So here it will go backwards. That means the chain has been formed in an upwards or backwards manner. Here, this is the default constructor. Inside this default constructor body, we have called the single parameterized constructor with a value 5. So this 5 value will go into this X. Whenever this method will be executed, the compiler control will be transferred to this single parameterized method. And this value 5 will be passed into X. Then this statement will be executed, which will give you 5 as the first output. Then again the compiler control will come here, and the remaining statement, which is this, will be executed. That means the next output would be default constructor. This is the main class inside which we have created an object A of this class, and this object A creation statement will actually call this default constructor here, this one, and this will in turn call this single parameterized constructor. That means here the call is being made backwards. Here we have called this one from this one, just unlike the previous one. Here in the previous program, you have seen that the call is being made downwards, and here the call is being made backwards. So here first this statement, this constructor will be executed, then the chain will go backwards, then this constructor will be executed. So this is the output of the program. As you can see that I have already compiled it. So the first output that is shown here is 5. That means this is giving you the output of the single parameterized constructor, and next the default constructor output, which is a simple statement, has been shown here. That means first the second constructor is being executed here, and then the chain is going backwards, and then the first constructor written there is being executed. So it is also constructor chaining, but the chain is going upwards. And in the previous example, you have seen that that's also an example program of constructor chaining, but the chain was going downwards or bottomwards. So this is another use of this keyword, where you have seen that here this keyword has been used as a method in order to implement the concept of constructor chaining in Java. Let us discuss another use of this keyword here in today's class, which is also a redundant use of this keyword. This program demonstrates the use of this keyword, where you will see that here this keyword is being used to invoke the current object. You have already seen the use of this keyword, which will invoke the current object, and this is a redundant use of this keyword, as I have already explained in my previous lectures. But in that case, you have seen how this keyword can be used in order to invoke the current object. As we all know that object will always get a copy of the class members, and class members mean the instance variables and the members. So the copies of the instance variables and the members will come into its object. You have implemented this concept of this keyword, which will call the or invoke the current object using the instance variable. That means there in that program, this keyword was being used before an instance variable, to see how if you use this keyword there or if you don't use this keyword there, both the cases will give you the same output. Here today we will see how this keyword can be used before a method call or before a method name in order to invoke the current object. Let's explain this program. This is a user defined class A. Inside it, a method M is there, which will just print a simple statement inside M method. And another method N is there, and from inside this N method we will call this M method. We all know that we can easily call one method from another method. Here we will call this M method from this N method. Normally in all our previous programs we have seen that how to call a user defined method from the main method. Today we will see how to call one user defined method from another user defined method body. So here N is a user defined method, M is also a user defined method. We will call this M method from inside this N method body. Inside this N method, we have just printed a simple statement inside N method, and then we have called the M method using the this keyword. So here if you use this keyword, the use of this keyword here will make the compiler understand that currently you are working with which object. Currently you are working with this A object. Whenever this main method will be executed, this A object will be created of this A class. Then using the object we will call this N method. Whenever this N method will be called, the compiler control will be directly transferred to the body of this N method. Inside this N method we have printed this, so this will be your first output. Then this M method will be called, and whenever this M method will be called, this method will work, and it will make the compiler understand explicitly that currently you are working with A object, and using this A object you have called this N method, and inside the N method body you have called this M method. So if you don't give this keyword here, then also this program will give you the same output. That means if you don't write this keyword here, if you just call the M method from inside the N method like this, then also it is going to give you the same output. If you write it here, then also it is going to give you the same output. So here you can see that this keyword can be used to invoke current object, and here you have seen that how this keyword can be used before a method call also. So let's execute the program to see the output. So this program is going to give you this output inside N method and then inside M method. So first it will give you the output of this N method, the statement that has been printed inside N method, and then it will call the M method from inside its body using this keyword, and then the M method body will be executed, which will give you inside M method as output. So this is the output of this program. If you don't give this keyword there, then also it is going to give you the same output. Let me show you. So I have deleted this keyword here, and let's execute the program to show you the output. Here you can see that the same output is being shown here inside N method and then inside M method, and here we have not used this keyword before the call to the M method. So both the cases will give you the same output. That means the use of this keyword here before the calling of the M method is redundant here. So in both the cases, whether you are calling a method from another method, or you are calling or accessing an instance variable inside a constructor body or a method body, if you write this keyword before the instance variable or before the method calling in order to invoke the current object, in all these cases the use of this keyword is redundant. But as I have just explained in today's lecture, that use of this method in order to implement constructor chaining is very much important, and use of this keyword in order to differentiate between instance variables and local variables of the same names in order to prevent instance variable hiding by the local variables is also a very important use of this keyword. This is a wrap for today's class. In the next lecture, we will see that Objects can also be passed as parameters, and we will explain the concept of that also, and we will do some example programs also in order to show you how objects can be passed as parameters. Thank you for listening to today's lecture. See you in the next lecture.